Hello there. Many people ask me about how I started at the piano, and I don't think everyone knows that, only a few people. So I thought I'd just share that with you, but with a highlight on what I used to do to get pretty good, and what I maybe would have done differently, and hopefully my journey will help you on yours. So the first thing is, I didn't have any interest in music when I was even early teenager. My late grandfather used to play lots of music from the Great American Songbook. He knew his major sevens and minor sevens in a couple of keys. He could play some sixth chords. He had a nice sort of like left hand going on. I kind of got that from him, I guess. And he had a teacher who taught him lots of jazz songs, who I met once or twice when I was very young. But I didn't really have a big interest in the piano. But there was this one moment, which I'll never forget, where I was in school in England, year 7 or 8, I think it was. I was probably 12, 13. And the music teacher was playing some jazz in the music room. He was already a music teacher. I didn't have any interest particularly in playing the piano. And I asked him what he's doing on this lunch break. And he said he's just playing some jazz, just messing around, playing some nice, jazzy chord stuff. And I didn't really know what that meant. I said, how are you able to play without looking at any sheet music? He said, well, I know the scales which go with the chords, and I know what chord comes next. And that intrigued me. So the first thing he taught me was major scale mastery. So it all comes from there. That's why I'm pushing major scale mastery. So within a week or two, I knew the major scales. I was doing them at the piano, away from the piano, in my mind. So the first thing, the main takeaway from this whole video is going to be major scale mastery. It doesn't matter what path you're on, what your musical personality is, what music you want to play, what age you are. You have to know your major scales, because everything is orientated and based on major scales. So I got those down very, very quickly. I have a playlist with 12 videos to help you with your major scale mastery, so no excuses there. And I just used to spend time in the practice room and around my grandparents' house just playing these scales. I was playing them with natural fingering, as I call it. I was playing them with, different fingering, just to sort of get a different feel. Of course, both hands, together. And that's one important thing. Everything I did with the right hand, I was able to do with the left hand. And that's why, I can just move around with chords in both hands, all the chromatic stuff. It's all the same for both hands, basically. This is probably 100%. This is maybe 80-ish percent, 85% good enough, because I'm naturally right-handed. So it was really about major scale orientation, major scale mastery, which doesn't mean playing them super fast. It means knowing the shape. So A flat, I can just see the shape of A flat in my head before I even play it. So you can just kind of move around it anywhere. I call this poking. I just see the notes anywhere on the piano in the key of A flat. The whole piano becomes A flat in that case. And then once I'd got the major scales down in my head and at the piano, and I felt comfortable. By the way, everything I did was staccato because I didn't know how to use the pedal. So I got quite a nice finger rapidity and independence from doing staccato only, because I didn't know what legato was. Not to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need the pedal for legato, but they do go well together. So after that came chords. And this is before any repertoire. I learned the simple template of 1, 3, 5, 7 for all 12 keys. But don't forget, everything I'm saying now implies I knew the 12 shapes. I could play all the scales with one finger or with natural fingering. I just knew them all. So when I have to find 1, 3, 5, 7, the kind of starting point for a chord, both hands, of course, it was very easy. It was very, very quick. So I was able to just sit in the practice room for sort of half an hour, 45 minutes every lunchtime. And whenever I was around my grandparents for dinner, I'd be on the piano, which is, I think it's still there. The piano I started on is at least in the family. And I was just playing around with these different chord types in different keys, just seeing how quickly I could find the 1, 3, and 5, and 7 in any key that my eye looked at, of course, with both hands. So every day I'd maybe focus on 2 or 3 or 4 keys, and I'd just play all these different chords in different ways, descending. So I wasn't doing technical exercises, and this is something I wish I was doing sooner. So I kind of got my finger independence from messing around with chord types in different places and doing the major scale stuff. Sometimes I'd just sit at the piano and do this. Once or twice a teacher would come in and say, can you just play a bit more quietly? We're trying to work or eat. I guess in a way you could say that taught me dynamics, to learn how to play quietly and then a bit harder without changing speed. So yeah, that was mainly, these are the first things I was doing before repertoire. That's very, very important to note. So with all those chords, let me just tell you the chords I was learning first. Major 7, 6, dominant 7, minor 7. These were the first chords I was playing around with before repertoire. Of course, repertoire came after a few months. But so I recommend that you do that. That's part of your homework. Play all the major scales, get them down. It's done in a week or two. One major scale a day, 12 days for the rest of your life is done. And then you just get used to finding 1, 3, 5, and 7. And you'll just become so familiar with it. If you just spend, like I say, a day on 1 or 2 keys, this is minutes and hours. This is not months and years. Because I had this stuff down very, very quickly. I didn't have any natural ability. I mean, maybe some people say I might have, but there was a day when I couldn't play a thing on the piano. I didn't know what any 2 notes were. And then, pretty quickly, it's okay, fine. These 4 fingers feel comfortable, natural fingering all the way. I see the shape of D. Here's the 1, 3, 5, 7. You just keep playing it. You just see it everywhere. It just became very familiar to me. B. So the more you do it, the more they get familiar. It's that simple. So I'm not able to do what I can do now because I suddenly learnt it, in the last year. All of this stuff was within months in the beginning, even weeks. And of course, playing them in my head as well when I'm walking around, because you're away from the piano, 95% of the time. So you have to use your internal piano. If you don't know it in your mind, you can't do it at the piano. So I was seeing all of these shapes: G major 7, G minor 7, G7, G6, in my mind. So when I came to the piano, I was like, oh, that's that G6 thing here with the E on top. And then you just start to make these connections. E is the 6th of G. And they really solidify over time, very, very quickly, over a short amount of time. So major scales and those chord types. Major 7, 6, and dominant 7. And then with the minor, you can play minor 7. And then, of course, it becomes logical that you can play the minor with the major 7 and the minor with the 6. Which are a bit less common, but, it's still possible. And I was doing that in all the keys. Doesn't matter what the key is. F sharp 6, major 7, 7, and then with the minor 7, minor 6, minor major 7. It just doesn't matter. But your fingers just get used to being in a key. When I see the key of E, I'm in the key of E, E minor 7, whatever the chord is. I'm seeing that scale of E. The piano feels like the key of E. It doesn't matter where I am. I just see it everywhere. So that comes very, very quickly if you just make a small effort. Chord types, done. Then I met a very good friend of mine who's still a good friend, and he used to give me some jazz recordings. So a lot of my training came from listening. I wasn't only listening to the piano, and sometimes there wasn't a piano, it was just a bass and a guitarist maybe, or just a guitarist alone, like Joe Pass, for example. So very early on, maybe after 2 to 3 years of like messing around and trying to learn what the chord symbols mean and being able to play them, I just started to listen a lot, and that includes Bill Evans, Miles Davis, Ornette Coleman, Vanden one comes to mind, Red Garland on the piano, of course, all the Coltrane, all the big names, Thelonious Monk, and of course Oscar Peterson. All of this stuff helped me a lot in terms of what phrases they use, how they play chords, how they comp, all this like rhythm stuff. Very, very useful. So listen. And then, of course, combined with what my granddad was doing, he had the Great American Songbook. So, of course, he started to show me some of his favourite songs, and I started to take a lot more interest. This is when I was like 14, 15 or so. And he would play his favourite song, Misty. Very, very nice song. And I learnt that, probably one of my first songs, along with Fly Me to the Moon, all these old original songs. And I wasn't really learning the chord progressions. I was just memorizing by force. Okay, it's E flat, and then it's B flat minor 7, then it's E flat 7, then it's A. I wasn't putting numbers to them just yet. So these things were kind of all going on at the same time. Lots of listening. I knew my major scales. I could find chords or knew lots very, very quickly. And a lot of them I don't like the word finger memory or muscle memory. I'd call it more like familiarity, maybe. Because when I see a chord and a chord type in a key, F whole diminished, my brain sees it instantly before my hands do, but when I play it, it feels familiar. I'm not playing it from a muscle memory necessarily. I'm playing it because I actually see it in the key of F. Here's the minor, here's the flat 5, here's the 6. I'm still in the key of F when I play it. So it was a combination of lots of listening and learning some basic songs by force, developing my internal piano visually, major scales and everything, all that was done. And then the things like rhythm and touch and feel and phrasing and all that comes from listening again. And it just all comes together, Then, I become 18, 19, 20. I start to acquire more songs. And about that time is when I start to discover, maybe 17, 18 or so, about this time, I read the Jazz Theory book by Mark Levine. You can find that online. It's everywhere. I don't know how much it is now, $30, $40 maybe. It's quite a big, thick book, ring bound. And I just learned the jazz theory. But it was very easy because it was all based on major scales. All the diatonic chord theory stuff is based on major scales. Let me just give you one example of that, but I have a video on modal theory. The idea is that, let's take the key of F. Every note in the key, and this applies to all 12 keys, I'm just doing it in the key of F, but what I'm saying, you can literally replace with any of the other keys. You have to understand that each degree of the major scale, including 1 all the way up to 7, has its own 4-note chord. And these are called diatonic chords because they fit in the master key, which in this case is F. But again, it applies to all 12 keys. So for example, if you're playing like an A, what chord would you play on A when the song is in the key of F? And this applies about 85% of the time. Of course, there are some songs which have exceptions where it doesn't follow the rule, but that's what makes it all spicy and, nice and interesting and unexpected. But 80 to 85% of the time, it will be a diatonic chord because it's in the master key. So for example, just one example, don't overwhelm you. If the piece is in F with 1 flat, B flat, and there's an A chord, you can kind of anticipate it by knowing this theory. It's just a little table to remember. And again, I have a video on it, but the logic is this. It's all from major scales, you see. What you do is you take the 1, 3, 5, 7 from A, which you already know because you know your major scales. So you can find 1, 3, 5, and 7. And then you simply say to yourself, which of these notes, of course it will never be the first one because that's from the major scale that you're in. So which of these other 3 notes are not in the key of F? Because that's our master key. So C sharp isn't in the key of F. And whenever a note isn't in the key, it just comes down a semitone. That's it. So when I learned that, I was like, okay, that's just so obvious, so easy. E doesn't need to change. And the G sharp isn't in F, so it comes down to G. What's the result? A minor 7. So, okay. So what you learn is that on the root, on the 1, when you do 1, 3, 5, 7, you get a major 7. On the 2, the result is a minor 7. On the 3, it's a minor 7. On the 4, it's a major 7. On the 5, it's a dominant 7. On the 6, it's minor 7. And on the 7, it's a minor 7, but the 5 is flattened, as you can see. E is the 7th of F. We get E, we get G, which are in the key of F. B isn't, it has to be B flat. That's the flat 5 of E, the key of the chord we're playing. And then, of course, D is the 7, which was a D sharp in the key of E, but it's now a D because D sharp is not in the key of F. So it's all very logical, and it's only possible to understand that stuff when you know major scales. So that was all coming together. And then I started to really study and understand that all songs in jazz are built on chord progressions, regular chord progressions. Often you'll get the infamous 2-5-1. Often songs go up a fourth. Some songs it goes 1, 2, 3, maybe a minor as a whole diminished, and then 2-5-1. So you just get used to very common chord progressions. But I didn't know I knew that because I knew lots of songs. I hadn't learnt them originally in the beginning because I learnt them by force. I didn't learn them numerically. That came a bit later when I already had maybe 10 or 15 songs in my repertoire by force. So when I put all the number systems in place, it made so much sense. And then I realized I can learn all these jazz songs so quickly. I look at the lead sheet, I see what key it's in, I put the chords in the key, and you find, 2-5-1, da-da-da, it goes up a fourth, here's a 2-5-1 again. And you start to see all these same patterns. It's really easy, really. I have a video I call it the one jazz piece. It's a slightly older video. Maybe I'll do it again. But it just proves the point that I think I show you like 10 songs in there or something. And I just show how they're so similar, but they're different because of the melody, of course, and the tempo and the rhythm and everything. So all of these things were coming together. Now, technical exercises is one of the last things I'd like to talk about. I wish I had started technical exercises sooner. My technical exercises were just, playing major scales like this for, 10 minutes with each hand. That's nice. It works. But I didn't really have a big variety of technical exercises. Now I have a playlist with over 100 videos, and each video has got more than one technical exercise. So there are lots and lots that you can do, and there's not much repetition in those either. So when I discovered Franz Liszt, when I was maybe 24, I suppose, when I really got deep into that, maybe 25, something like that, 25 or so. I just thought, okay, wow, I need to spend a lot more time on finger independence and precision with my eyes closed. And I already had, pretty good fingering technique, but it wasn't good enough. Basically, my left hand was still quite weak. So I learned that you can use chromatics and major scales, or any scale, but major scales and chromatics and chords to do technical exercises. And of course, I have a whole playlist, so I don't need to go into that. But the main one I like, and some people know this, I call it the butterfly effect, because it covers everything. The way that you do this, I'm very happy to give you this if you haven't seen it before, is that you choose two notes where the pattern would be symmetrical on the way out, meaning black, white, white, black. It's symmetrical. In other words, if you do it like this, it's not symmetrical because it's all wonky. So you find a pair of notes like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. I like to start on C and E, or even these two, but I'll do it on D and E, on C and E. And you start with the thumb, and you, one finger at a time, you go out to its natural limit, which is great because that's the only distance that those two fingers will ever have to work in together. So the thumb and the index finger will probably never go beyond that. I can go even further, but it's silly, I don't need to. Maybe even just there. Because if I go any further, I'm going to use another finger. So with eyes closed, I was doing this for absolutely hours and weeks until my fingers were aching, honestly. And then you do it with your middle finger. And of course, that's going to go a bit further, naturally to a D maybe. And then you just try and do it faster. That's going to give you so much precision. And then, of course, you go all the way out to the little finger, which you can maybe start here comfortably. And go out to maybe just an octave. And come back into wherever it's comfortable. And you're getting all the variations of thumb with the other fingers. And then, of course, you start on the index finger and do it with the remaining three. So you get their combinations. Some of them are only going to be a few notes because you'll never need to go further. And then with the ring finger, etc. And then with the little finger. So every finger, and then you put the middle finger in the middle and do these two, and then you finally end up with the ring finger, just doing with the little finger. So you go all the way out like that, and you get every finger combination. And if you can do that for a couple of hours over the next weeks, you're going to really feel it there. That's great. Another thing I worked out, which was important, is endurance. So instead of just doing a technical exercise until you can do it, keep doing it. Not fast. I like to say that aching is good, but pain is bad. So when you start to get a bit of tension in the tendons in your lower arms and your forearms, stop. That's very important. I also developed a physical little regime. I have a video on that, but I every day, even to this day, 22nd of, what is it today? I don't know what the date is, beginning of August. I do these exercises all the time with my fingers. I bend them a little bit. I mainly make these fists. I do these like finger rolls and stuff. I do them every day. I don't know how many, maybe 100 or so. So I've always got flexible fingers. Really, really important. So yeah, basically that's kind of my journey really. Oh, and of course sight reading. I like to say sight reading is like a party trick really. You don't need to be able to play off the page like this. If you're doing some piano degree or something like that, of course it's, it has its need, or if you're working in an orchestra, of course. But if you need to read a score to be able to play it, study the score away from the piano first. Identify the key signature, the tempo, study the markings to see if there's any that you don't know. So fill in any theory holes. That's the way I say it. And then identify the left hand pattern. What's it doing? It might be, some simple left hand like this. It might be some sort of thing like this. Identify the chords. See what the chord progression is. When you look at the melody line, do it in your mind, of course, and identify, based on the key, how the melody is moving around. I'm just thinking of one of the few pieces I've had to read the sheet music for is Liszt's Liebestraum. I think you all know that. But I play it in my own way now. It's hard to reach without knocking the camera off. Anyway, so I do it in my own way now. But that chord progression, when I studied it, is just 1, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Liszt in 1850 or so, 1852 or something like that when he wrote it, is using a jazz chord progression, 1, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And all the chords, apart from the first one, are dominant sevens. Which should be jazzy, and yet it sounds so gentle and romantic. It doesn't sound like jazz at all. It's all very pretty and flowery and flowy. And when you look at the melody of that, it basically follows the scale of A flat, of course, with a tiny little tension note. It's all the notes of A flat. It's just all the notes of A flat. There's nothing complicated apart from this little tension note, of course. Same with Chopin. So you can, when you see everything in the major scale, it makes it so much easier. All the chords, they are in the key of A flat, just all played as sevenths. So it's very interesting when you start to study the score like that. And then when you come to the piano, you can, basically play it from memory because you actually have mastered the score. It's very, very interesting. So if you can put all of these things together, you will become very good very quickly. And that's what I want for you. It comes down to major scale mastery, get the chords down, play around with every chord type in every key. I've got videos on that as well. Learn some diatonic chord theory, modal theory. I've got a video on that as well. Play around with a ton of technical exercises. I have a whole playlist on that for you as well. I have lots of song analyses as well. Studying lead sheets, I have that as well. Get your technical exercises. I've already said that, but I've got lots of those videos. Personalize them all the time. Do them with your eyes closed. Always sit in front of the same note. For me, it's middle D when there's not a camera tripod in the way. Listen a lot to music, whatever you want to be able to play. Get it into your internal jukebox, as I call it. Find your natural limit with technical exercises. Find your natural fingering. And somehow, in months, all of this will come together and you will be surprisingly good. And I'd like to finish with just by saying that one day I'd like to learn guitar and blues and jazz guitar. And I can't play anything on the guitar. All I know is the names of the strings. That's it. I don't even know how many frets there are. I don't know any chord shapes. I don't know anything, any scales or nothing. I don't know any techniques. Zero. But I can assure you that I'll probably make another channel actually and show my progress. And I'm going to do it first by mastering the fretboard on my mind. I'm going to have an internal fretboard before I buy a guitar, and I'm going to learn every note on each string all the way up the fretboard. And then, of course, because I know the theory for the scales, I'm going to know the scale shapes all the way up from the lowest end all the way to the top. And then I'll be able to, go and buy a guitar and start to feel it and watch some videos on technique and common techniques and all these kind of things. But within 6 months, I would say, by 6 months, I'm going to be pretty good. People are going to think I've been playing for years because I'm going to know every major scale all across the fretboard. I'm going to develop a good technique from the beginning. And, I'm basically practicing what I preach to you. So if you can do that on the piano where it's super easy, it's just a 12-note block from C to B 7 times, and that's it. And it all comes down to major scale shapes because everything is based on major scales. Even minor scales are major scales modified. Blues scales are notes from the major scale modified. Chords are based on tones from the major scale. All the jazz fancy stuff is all notes from the major scale, but just in the next octave. 9, 11, and 13. It's still the same major scale. Technical exercises, they use major scales or chromatics. There's only 12 notes in that. So the guitar is probably more complicated, really. So I just hope you can put all this together and, make your way. I have, of course, my water pianism syllabus, which helps you with this. There's the links and everything below. If you like any private lessons, I'm always available. So I just really want to help people, achieve their piano dreams. And that's why I make these videos. So hopefully all of this has been of some use to you. As always, likes, comments, subscriptions are always welcome. Have a look at my video management website, the Water Pianism syllabus, perhaps Patreon, and all my playlists. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for listening. All the best, and bye for now.